I never planned to cause a scene at my brother Tyler's wedding, but when my father grabbed the microphone during his speech and looked directly at me with that familiar smirk, everything changed. "Let us all raise a glass to the groom," he announced to the 200 guests. "He may not be married before today, not educated like his brother, but at least he is good for a check." The crowd roared with laughter as my family nodded in agreement. In that moment, something inside me finally snapped. 7 years of financing their lifestyles, paying off their debts, and being treated like nothing more than a walking ATM crystallized into perfect clarity. I stood up, took the microphone, and said the words that would permanently alter our family dynamic. "You know what? You are right. I am not family. I am just your wallet. And that $100,000 wedding gift, forget it." Before I tell you what happened next, drop a comment letting me know where you are watching from, and hit that subscribe button if you have ever had to stand up to family members who only valued you for what you could give them. My relationship with my family has always been complicated by money. Growing up in a middle-class neighborhood in Ohio, we were comfortable but not wealthy. My father worked in insurance sales while my mother managed a small clothing boutique. Our home was modest, and luxuries like vacations or new cars were rare occurrences planned years in advance. The dynamic shifted dramatically when I turned 16 and discovered an unexpected talent for coding. What began as a hobby building simple websites for local businesses quickly evolved into a genuine skill set that attracted attention. By 17, I was earning more on weekends than my father made. In a week, a fact that he initially found amusing, but gradually came to resent. "Real men work with their hands," he would say whenever my coding came up in conversation. "Sitting at a computer all day is not a real job." My younger brother, Tyler, 3 years my junior, became the repository for my parents' traditional expectations. While I was the weird computer kid, Tyler was the football player, the socially outgoing one, the son who enjoyed fishing with dad and never questioned the family's established values. The contrast created a fundamental division that would define our relationship into adulthood. After high school, I chose to skip college, recognizing that the technology industry valued skills over degrees. This decision became another point of contention with my parents, who viewed traditional education as the only legitimate path to success. Tyler, meanwhile, enrolled at the local state university, though his academic performance was mediocre at best. "At least he is getting a proper foundation," my mother would say pointedly whenever Tyler's education came up in conversation. "Some things are worth more than money." The irony of this statement became apparent during Tyler's sophomore year, when he called me in a panic over unpaid tuition and the threat of being dropped from his classes. Without telling our parents, I transferred $15,000 to cover his outstanding balance, the first of many financial rescues I would perform for my family. By 23, my software development company had secured several major contracts, transforming my modest success into genuine wealth. I purchased a comfortable home in a gated community, invested in diversified portfolios, and established the financial security that had eluded my parents throughout their working lives. Tyler graduated after 5 years with a communications degree and minimal job prospects. Rather than find employment, he moved back home and spent months networking at local bars while my parents covered his expenses. When they began struggling to keep up with their mortgage due to these additional costs, I stepped in again, setting up monthly transfers to supplement their income. "We are so blessed that you are doing well," my mother would say, never directly acknowledging the financial support I provided. "God provides through mysterious ways." This pattern of indirect dependence continued for years. My father's car broke down. I purchased him a new one. The family home needed a new roof. I covered the cost. Tyler wanted to start a business, selling custom fishing lures. I provided the startup capital that was never mentioned again when the venture inevitably failed within 6 months. Throughout these transactions, a peculiar family mythology developed. Despite being the financial backbone of our family, I was still somehow viewed as less successful than Tyler in ways that truly mattered. My lack of a college degree was referenced frequently, as was my single status compared to Tyler's active dating life. "Money is not everything" became my father's favorite refrain, typically uttered shortly after depositing my latest check. "Some things are more important, like family and tradition." The tradition as it evolved was that I would provide financially while remaining the family outsider valued for my resources, but excluded from genuine emotional connection. This unspoken arrangement might have continued indefinitely had Tyler not met Melissa, the woman who would become his bride and the catalyst for our family's most dramatic confrontation. Melissa entered our family dynamic like a whirlwind, a vivacious brunette with expensive tastes and a talent for making Tyler feel like the center of the universe. Within 3 months of dating, they were engaged, an announcement made at a family dinner that I had paid for at an upscale restaurant chosen by my mother. "We are thinking about a spring wedding," Melissa announced, flashing a diamond ring that immediately struck me as beyond Tyler's financial means. Something truly special to start our life together properly. Later that evening, Tyler confirmed my suspicions about the ring, calling to ask if I could temporarily cover the $6,000 credit card charge he had incurred. "I will pay you back once I land a proper job," he assured me, though we both knew his 2 years of unemployment made this unlikely. I transferred the money the next morning, adding it mentally to the growing list of loans that would never be repaid. What I did not anticipate was that this ring would be merely the opening salvo in an escalating series of wedding-related expenses that would somehow become my responsibility. The following weeks brought an onslaught of calls and texts, each presenting another wedding cost as an urgent family matter requiring my attention. Melissa had fallen in love with a venue that required a $20,000 deposit. Tyler needed a new suit because nothing off the rack would be appropriate for such an occasion. My mother worried that certain family members might be offended if the bar was not top shelf. Each request came with the same implicit understanding that my contribution would be financial only, not a matter of opinion or input. When I suggested more affordable options for the venue, my mother sighed heavily. "This is Tyler's special day. Do you really want to ruin it with your practicality?" The breaking point should have come when Tyler called about the honeymoon, a 3-week tour of Europe that would cost nearly $40,000. Instead of setting a boundary, I found myself agreeing once again, trapped in the familiar pattern of buying acceptance through financial support. 2 months before the wedding, during a family dinner ostensibly to finalize details, I discovered that my parents had been telling extended family members that they were hosting and paying for the entire celebration. "Why would you say that?" I asked my mother privately after overhearing her accept compliments from an aunt about her generosity. "Well, we are the parents," she replied, as if this explained everything. "It would look strange if people knew you were paying. They might think we could not provide for our own son's wedding." The conversation illustrated the fundamental disconnect that had defined our relationship for years. My financial support was simultaneously essential and invisible, expected yet unacknowledged. I was both indispensable and erased from the narrative. As the wedding approached, I calculated that my total contribution had surpassed $150,000, not including the generous cash gift I had planned as a wedding present. Yet in all the formal communications programs and acknowledgments, my role remained unmentioned. The final insult came during the rehearsal dinner, when Tyler gave an emotional speech thanking our parents for making this entire celebration possible and always being there for him financially and emotionally. As the room applauded their supposed generosity, my father caught my eye across the table and winked, a small gesture that communicated volumes about our unspoken arrangement. That night in my hotel room, I considered simply leaving before the wedding, removing myself from a situation where my worth was measured solely by my checkbook. Something kept me there, however, some lingering hope that my family might finally recognize me as more than a financial resource, that my contribution to Tyler's special day might earn me genuine inclusion rather than continued exploitation. This hope, naive as it was, led me to don my tuxedo the following afternoon and take my place in the family section at the lavish ceremony my money had purchased. It led me to smile for photographs and congratulate the bride and groom with sincerity. And it led me to the reception hall where my father would finally shatter the last of my illusions about my place within the family I had financially supported for so many years. The wedding reception was being held at the Grand, the most expensive venue in the city, with crystal chandeliers, marble columns, and a 5-star catering service. The space was transformed, with elaborate floral arrangements, custom lighting, and personalized details that reflected Melissa's expensive tastes rather than Tyler's more modest sensibilities. I was seated at what was technically the family table, though positioned at the far end, nearly hidden behind a large centerpiece. My parents occupied places of honor near the newlyweds, beaming with pride as guests approached to compliment the lavish celebration they had supposedly provided. The meal service had just concluded when my father stood and tapped his knife against his champagne flute, signaling his intention to make a toast. The room quieted as he took the microphone, his expression reflecting the particular blend of sentimentality and self-satisfaction that characterized his public performances. I want to thank everyone for joining us on this special day. He began, his voice carrying clearly through the professional sound system I had paid for. As a father, nothing makes me prouder than seeing my son find happiness with such a wonderful woman. The speech continued with predictable platitudes about marriage and family, drawing appreciative nods from the assembled guests. Had it ended there, the evening might have proceeded without incident, another example of my invisibility that I had learned to accept over the years. But as my father neared his conclusion, his eyes found me at the far end of the table, and something shifted in his expression, a glint of mean-spirited humor that I recognized from childhood moments of public humiliation. "Let us all raise a glass to the groom," he announced, gaze still fixed on me. "He may not be married before today, not educated like his brother, but at least he is good for a check." The crowd roared with laughter, interpreting the comment as a harmless joke rather than the pointed dismissal it actually represented. My mother covered her smile with her napkin, while Tyler grinned and raised his glass in my direction, seemingly oblivious to the insult embedded in our father's words. In that moment, a strange clarity washed over me. 7 years of financial support, hundreds of thousands of dollars, freely given countless hours, spent solving my family's problems, all reduced to a punchline about my wallet being my only redeeming quality. All the times I had hoped for genuine inclusion, authentic appreciation, or simple recognition had led to this public confirmation of my true role, the family ATM valued for withdrawals, but otherwise irrelevant. Without fully forming a conscious decision, I found myself standing, moving toward my father, and gently taking the microphone from his hand. The room fell into curious silence as I adjusted my tie and surveyed the sea of faces, many strangers who knew nothing of the dynamics playing out before them. "You know what? You are right," I said, my voice steady, despite the adrenaline coursing through my body. "I am not family. I am just your wallet. And that $100,000 wedding gift, forget it." I turned to Melissa, whose expression had transformed from confusion to dawning horror as the implications of my words registered. "Oh, and the down payment for that house you have been looking at. You might want to start saving. That offer has expired as well." The silence that followed was absolute, 200 people collectively holding their breath as the magnitude of what was happening became clear. My father's face had drained of color while my mother appeared frozen in disbelief. Tyler stood abruptly, knocking over his chair in the process. "You cannot do this," he sputtered loud enough for nearby tables to hear. "You promised. We already put a deposit down on the house." His words focused entirely on the financial implications rather than the emotional wound that had prompted my action, confirmed that I had made the right decision. I placed the microphone carefully on the table, straightened my jacket, and addressed my brother directly. "I have been keeping promises and paying bills for 7 years, Tyler. I am done. Consider this my retirement from being the family bank." As I turned to leave, my mother grabbed my arm, her fingers digging painfully into my sleeve. "You cannot embarrass us like this," she hissed, her primary concern still the appearance of family harmony rather than the reality of what had transpired. "I am not the one who should be embarrassed," I replied quietly, gently removing her hand from my arm. "Enjoy the rest of the reception. Everything is paid for one last contribution from your walking checkbook." Walking out of that ballroom was simultaneously the most difficult and most liberating moment of my adult life. Behind me, I could hear my father attempting to recover the situation with forced laughter and comments about brotherly jokes, while Melissa appeared to be on the verge of tears. Ahead lay uncertainty about what remained of my family relationships, but also the promise of freedom from patterns of exploitation that had defined those relationships for too long. In the parking lot, I took a moment to breathe deeply, expecting to feel regret or shame for causing a scene at my brother's wedding. Instead, I experienced an overwhelming sense of release, as if I had set down a burden I had carried for so long I had forgotten its weight. Whatever came next would be on my terms, guided by genuine reciprocity, rather than one-sided financial obligation disguised as family duty. The fallout from the wedding incident was both immediate and far-reaching. My phone began vibrating with messages before I had even reached my car, a cascade of texts and calls from family members expressing shock, outrage, and in a few surprising cases, quiet support. My mother's messages oscillated between guilt trips and financial panic. "How could you humiliate us like this?" Quickly gave way to, "What about the final venue payment?" Her priorities remained unchanged even in crisis. Tyler's communications were equally revealing, focusing exclusively on the monetary implications rather than any emotional dimension. "We need to talk about the house deposit," and "Melissa is devastated about the wedding gift," underscored that his primary concern was the loss of financial support rather than damage to our relationship. My father characteristically sent nothing directly, though I later learned he had been calling mutual acquaintances to describe me as having a mental breakdown and asking if anyone knew of psychiatric resources that might help me come to my senses. The most unexpected response came from my cousin David, who had witnessed the entire exchange. "Been waiting years for someone to call Uncle Robert on his bullshit," his text read. "That took guts. Let me know if you want to grab a beer sometime." This small gesture of solidarity revealed something I had not considered, that others in the extended family had observed the dynamic without commenting, perhaps waiting for the inevitable breaking point that had finally arrived at the inevitable dynamic wedding reception. In the days following, I maintained radio silence with my immediate family, using the time to process my feelings and consider what boundaries would be necessary moving forward. I consulted with my financial advisor to ensure that any joint accounts or automatic payments benefiting my family were appropriately adjusted, a practical step that reinforced my commitment to changing the established patterns. 1 week after the wedding, Tyler and Melissa appeared unannounced at my home, the first direct contact since the incident. Their appearance was strategically timed during a neighborhood gathering, presumably to prevent me from turning them away without creating another scene. "We need to talk about what happened," Tyler began once I reluctantly invited them inside. "Things got out of hand, but we can fix this." "Fix what exactly?" I asked, genuinely curious about his perception of the situation. "This misunderstanding," Melissa interjected, her smile tight and calculated. "Families have disagreements all the time. We just need to move past it." What followed was a remarkable conversation in which neither of them directly acknowledged the hurtful toast or my years of financial support. Instead, they presented an elaborate plan by which I could make things right by providing the promised wedding gift in installments rather than a lump sum, an arrangement they characterized as a compromise. "We understand cash flow issues," Tyler explained magnanimously. "Everyone goes through tight periods." The assumption that my actions had been motivated by financial limitations rather than emotional boundaries was so disconnected from reality that I found myself speechless. When I finally responded, my answer was simpler than they expected. "No," I said, "I am not giving you the money. Not in installments, not in a lump sum. Our financial relationship is over." Melissa's pleasant facade cracked immediately. "You cannot just break promises because your feelings got hurt," she snapped. "We made commitments based on what you said you would provide." "That is the fundamental problem," I replied. "You made commitments, assuming access to my money, without ever considering that it was mine to give or withhold. That assumption ends today." They left without resolution. Tyler's parting shot a reminder that family is supposed to help family, a principle that had somehow never applied when I needed emotional support rather than providing financial assistance. The weeks that followed brought similar attempts at manipulation from my parents, ranging from health scares that mysteriously resolved once it became clear they would not result in monetary gifts to community pressure through shared church connections who reached out with concerns about my abandonment of family obligations. Through each interaction, I maintained the boundary established at the wedding, politely but firmly refusing to resume my role as the family's financial resource. The consistency of this position gradually changed the nature of the communications, as it became evident that no amount of guilt, anger, or manipulation would restore the previous arrangement. 3 months after the wedding incident, my mother requested a meeting at a neutral location, a coffee shop halfway between our homes. Expecting another attempt to re-establish financial support, I was surprised when she arrived alone without the usual arsenal of emotional manipulation tactics. I have been thinking about what happened, she began, after we had settled with our drinks, and about the years before that. I realized something I should have seen a long time ago. She paused, seeming to struggle with what came next. We treated you like a resource, not a son, and we never really thanked you for all you did for us. The acknowledgement, though belated and incomplete, represented the first genuine recognition of the dynamic that had defined our relationship for so long. It was not an apology, but it was a start, an opening that might eventually lead to more authentic connection if properly nurtured. My father and Tyler proved less capable of this reflection, maintaining that I had overreacted to just a joke and damaged family harmony over a misunderstanding. Their perspective remained centered on what they had lost materially, rather than what we might all gain through healthier relationships. The most profound changes, however, occurred in my life beyond family connections. Freed from the constant financial obligations and emotional drain of managing family expectations, I discovered time and energy for pursuits I had long neglected. I developed new friendships based on mutual interest rather than obligation, traveled without guilt about missing family emergencies, and eventually began dating someone who valued me for qualities entirely unrelated to my financial line. Status. Today, 2 years after the wedding incident that transformed our family dynamic, my relationships with various family members exist on a spectrum of healing and distance. My mother and I have established a cautious reconnection based on more equitable terms, with clear boundaries about financial matters and greater emphasis on authentic emotional exchange. My father maintains limited contact, primarily through group family messages and occasional holiday gatherings where our interactions remain cordial but superficial. Tyler and Melissa, facing the reality of living within their actual means, have adjusted their lifestyle expectations and rarely initiate contact unless absolutely necessary. The most surprising development has been the strengthening of connections with extended family members like my cousin David, who expressed relief at the disruption of unhealthy patterns that had affected the broader family system for years. These relationships, based on genuine affection rather than financial incentive, provide a model for what family connection can be when not distorted by exploitation or obligation. The lessons from this experience continue to shape my approach to relationships of all kinds. I have learned to recognize early warning signs of one-sided exchange, to establish clear boundaries before resentment builds, and to value myself beyond what I can provide materially to others. Most importantly, I have discovered that sometimes the greatest gift you can give yourself is the courage to say no to those who see you as nothing more than a means to their end. Standing up at that wedding reception was not about the money itself, but about reclaiming my dignity and refusing to participate any longer in a dynamic that diminished my worth to the size of my wallet. The financial cost of breaking free was significant, but the personal growth and self-respect gained in exchange have proven immeasurably more valuable than any dollar amount could reflect. Have you ever had to establish difficult boundaries with family members who only valued you for what you could provide? How did you find the courage to stand up for yourself? And what changed in your relationships afterward? Share your place experience in the comments below to help others who might be struggling with similar family dynamics. If this journey of breaking free from financial exploitation resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe for more stories about establishing healthy boundaries in complicated relationships. Share this video with someone who needs encouragement to value themselves beyond what they give to others. Thank you for listening to my journey from family ATM to self-respect, and remember that true family supports your growth, not just your bank account.